Brexit reaches the highest court in the land. An historic hearing in front of 11 judges will decide whether or not Parliament should be consulted.
Theresa May, hear us say! Immigrants are here to stay!
Protests outside as the court inside is told some involved in the case have faced threats of violence.
Also tonight, the former footballers who have set up a special trust to help victims of abuse.
A warning that our increased diversity is bringing more division.
And Arctic adventure, the conservationist who soared with the swans from Siberia.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale and Mark Austin.
Good evening. Never before have 11 judges squeezed themselves into Court 1 of the Supreme Court, but then never before has there been a legal challenge like this. At stake, who has the right to take the UK out of the EU? The government or Parliament?
Opening the government's case, the Attorney-General said the Prime Minister was perfectly entitled to use what's known as the royal prerogative to start Brexit without putting it to MPs first. He said the people had spoken and that Parliament had already agreed to allow ministers to enforce the result. Here's our political editor, Robert Peston, on the landmark case.
A heavy mist over the constitutional question of our age. Have we, the people, already decided that the UK is leaving the European Union? Or does this place, Parliament, have the final say? If in doubt, ask a judge. In fact, ask the country's top judges, the Supreme Court, in all their finery. Seen by some as impartial pillars of our democracy, by others, especially the press, as the enemy.
I appear on behalf of the...
So, does the government see them as part of a conspiracy to keep us in the EU?
The Registrar has asked all the parties involved in these proceedings whether they wish to ask any of the justices to stand down. All parties to the appeal have stated that they have no objection to any of us sitting on this appeal.
This is the wealthy individual, Gina Miller, who won a ruling in the High Court that MPs and Lords must give prior approval before Theresa May notifies the EU that we are formally leaving. She's had death threats from passionate Brexiteers.
Various individuals have received threats of serious violence and unpleasant abuse in emails and other electronic communications. Threatening and abusing people because they are exercising their fundamental right to go to court undermines the rule of law.
Now, the heart of the argument is about how when we joined what was then the Common Market in 1972, both the Prime Minister and MPs were involved.
One of the arguments that you will have to deal with is if our accession was the result of joint effort, should our departure not equally be so?
Outside the Supreme Court, passions are running high. The judges inside did their best to appear calm and neutral, although they did put Theresa May's barrister on the spot over his claim that she has the personal power, the executive power, to take us out of the European Union without the approval of MPs.
One of the reasons that many of those people voted to leave was for the supremacy of that place over there, Parliament. And when people come to this place, the Supreme Court, to argue precisely in favour of the sovereignty of Parliament, they have abuse and misinformation hurled at them.
I hope that 11 judges sit there and recognise the territory that they're sitting in right now, which is constitutionally very grave indeed. And I hope that they reflect on the fact that, this is not their business.
It'll be January before we know whether the judges will give the MPs and Lords here the power to mess with Theresa May's plans, whether they want it or not. Robert Peston, ITV News.
And Brexit is set to be one of the main issues among voters at this Thursday's by-election in the Sleaford and North Hykeham constituency in Lincolnshire. It was triggered by the resignation of Conservative MP Stephen Phillips, who had a huge majority.
But the main challenger, UKIP, is hoping there'll be another political shock similar to that in Richmond last week. Our social affairs editor, Penny Marshall, heard the views of voters.
Nice. And he beats.
In this small market town in Middle England, they're clearing out the old and choosing their new face at Westminster. And as they do so, the Brexit courtroom drama's having an impact.
Sold for £5.
1 in 3 voted to leave in this Tory stronghold, and in the Market Cafe, some now want Brexit action.
What message do you think Westminster needs to hear from Sleaford on Thursday?
I think they need to know that people have made a decision and they should respect the people's decision. Keep taking it to court for what?
I don't think it should be anything to do with the law court. It's been passed by the people.
The Supreme Court case is seen by many here as an attempt to slow, if not thwart, the will of the people. And ahead of the by-election, it's Brexit that's dominating, if not straining, relations with Westminster.
They don't really like what we think, do they, very much?
UKIP's Nigel Farage was in Sleaford this afternoon trying to win support from the town's Brexiteers. After last week's shock by-election result in metropolitan Richmond down south, he hopes the political fault lines may be moving. But in the local gym, there was some support for the government's pursuit of Brexit through the courts.
I'm very concerned about the fact that the judges at the appeal court were vilified in the press afterwards, and the fact there's already been attempts to vilify the current judges going for the Supreme Court appeal.
Through our courts and through Parliament is how we've upheld the system of democracy that we have in this country. Without that, we compromise what we stand for.
A lot of the younger people are more worried, and the older people, I think from everyone's opinions, are more racist.
On the doorsteps, the canvasser talk may be Brexit, but behind the doors, the concerns remain everyday matters of everyday life. As the politicians wait to hear what the judges think, on Thursday, it will be the chance of the people to tell the politicians what they think. Penny Marshall, ITV News, Sleaford.
And here on your screen is the full list of candidates that in that Sleaford and North Hycombe by-election, and that vote is on Thursday.
And tonight, the Governor of the Bank of England spoke about the current anti-establishment feeling, which he said was fuelled by unfairness and inequality. Mark Carney said many had lost trust in the system and some were living through the first lost decade since the 1860s. Well, our business editor, Joel Hills, joins me now. This is very outspoken, Mark Carney, isn't it? Why now?
This is a really striking speech, Mary. It's a theme he's spoken about before, but the fact that it's happening now makes it that much more pertinent. What he's saying is, look, free markets and new technology have made Britain as a country richer, but there are a lot of people who are feeling worse off. They've been left behind. As he put it, trade does not raise all boats. And tonight he delivered what amounts to a pretty stark warning for politicians and businesses that unless there is change, capitalism, there's a risk it will fail.
Many citizens in advanced economies are losing trust in the system. To them, measures of aggregate progress bear little resemblance or little relation to their own experience. And rather than a new golden era, globalization is associated with low wages, with insecure jobs, with stateless corporations, and striking inequalities.
So the point here, Mary, is that free markets have created losers as well as winners, and quite a number of losers. Anyone who, since the financial crisis, has barely seen their pay rise. Any young person who finds themselves in a position where they're thinking, well, hang on, I'm worse off than my parents were before me. Now, he's also clear that there is absolutely nothing at all that the Bank of England can do about this unfairness. Let's call it what it is. It's for companies and politicians to do more. Companies need to pay the tax that they owe, and they should be forced to if they don't. Politicians need to do more, specifically around education.
Interesting stuff. Joel, thank you very much indeed.
36 people are now known to have died in a warehouse fire in the Californian town of Oakland last Friday. Rescue teams are still recovering bodies from the wreckage. Some are believed to be as young as 16. Authorities are warning the death toll is likely to rise further.
And the President-elect Donald Trump took to Twitter today to defend his right to do just that, to tweet. Mr. Trump attacked the press, saying, if they would cover me accurately and honourably, I would have far less reason to tweet.
Now here, former footballers who say they were sexually abused early in their careers have launched a new trust to help victims and their families. Andy Woodward, who was the first player to break his silence over the scandal, says he hopes the authorities will support the new organisation so others do not have to suffer. It comes as the scale of the alleged crimes continues to grow, as our sports editor Steve Scott reports.
The speed with which this scandal is unfolding is astonishing. At the last count, there were 860 calls to the dedicated abuse hotline, linking 55 football clubs to 18 different police forces. Those figures are expected to rise, and behind every number is a life changed forever. Less than 3 weeks after Andy Woodward's bravery burst open the dam of sex abuse in youth football, he and 2 other former players launched a trust to help all victims and their families.
We all went through a terrible ordeal. We want justice and we want reform. We want to move forward to be able so we can protect those children that are suffering now in all walks of life, never mind football. We want to protect them because we went through it and people are going through it right now.
The Trust's lawyer says not only are abusers still working in football, but he also knows several clubs who've paid out to silence victims.
It's been a tidal wave of victims coming forward, but a number of victims have indicated that they've also been the subject of such confidentiality or gagging clauses.
The latest club to be drawn into the scandal, Fleet Town, who until recently had employed a coach who, when at Southampton, faced multiple allegations of abuse.
Most of the players that were with me at Southampton, they followed me.
Bob Higgins famously coached Alan Shearer, among others. A case against him alleging abuse collapsed in 1992. But it's emerged by then he was on the game's radar. In 1989, the Football League sent a letter to all its clubs carrying a warning about Higgins and his academy. It said, "I would ask all clubs which might be thinking of becoming involved to give this office the opportunity of appraising them of the situation before taking any steps in this direction." One manager who worked alongside Higgins at Southampton was asked to confront him when rumours circulated about his behaviour.
The manager asked me to have a word with him, and which I did, and he got very annoyed and said that he would sue anybody who said anything against him. Jumped up and stormed out.
Football's secret pain is slowly revealing itself, and thanks to men like Andy Woodward, very little will be hidden for much longer. Steve Scott, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, a political crisis in Italy after the Prime Minister there resigns.
And taking to the air, the conservationist trying to save her favourite swans. You? Me?
Go on.
Those stories and more after the break. Welcome back. There was a warning today that Britain is becoming more divided as it becomes more diverse. Dame Louise Casey said successive governments had failed to help growing numbers of immigrants to integrate. She said her report into the issue would be difficult to take for Muslim communities in particular, where poor English skills and the dominance of men are holding women back. 16% of the Muslim population cannot speak English well or at all. 22% of Muslim women have poor English skills, and more than half of Pakistani and Bangladeshi women of working age do not have jobs. Our national editor, Allegra Stratton, has this special report.
Of everywhere Louise Casey has been in the UK, this is the most important.
You're a star, you know that.
She tried that. The government's integration advisor has brought us to Sparkhill, Birmingham, and a community centre helping Muslim women to learn English. What's the link? What's your report found that means that this place is so important?
We have some women living in this country who don't understand what their rights are, often because they don't speak English or that they don't understand what the rules are. They don't, and to be blunt, a lot of the men are quite happy to keep them that way. I am tired of not talking about it, and I don't think it's just up to Muslim women leaders to lead this charge. I think it's the responsibility of all of us.
Asha, is she right?
Yeah, she is right, because there are certain barriers that hold back our women.
Today, 16 Muslim women have come to meet Casey.
How many people were born here Or is everybody in the group not born here? And
everyone in the group is not born here.
Hence they have no English.
They have English-speaking friends, or they would like them? You don't have any?
You don't have any friends that speak English?
Do they feel British?
Yes.
They all wanted jobs, but none of them right now had one. Do you think that you would be able to do any job you'd like if your English was better, if you carry on veiling your face?
Yeah, if a woman job, yeah.
You have a right to dress any way you want, and I do not want my report to be yet again telling women how they should dress. But where people want to work in an environment, in this country, we find the full face veil difficult.
Casey's report has hard truths for all ethnicities, but she believes Muslim women the most isolated.
I thought that was a tough meeting in that I think that in many ways sums up an awful lot of the discussions that I have, and as soon as the cameras are switched off, somebody comes up to me and says, "You're right." The biggest thing we've got to do is have a gentle, kind conversation that actually they've also experienced probably racism. They will have experienced Islamophobia. It's not like anybody's making their lives easy. We have to own this as a country. It's all our problem.
But when the government responds next year, will they own this problem too? Allegra Stratton, ITV News, Birmingham.
A British woman working in Lapland as a Santa tour guide has been stabbed to death. The 26-year-old, believed to be from Scotland, was killed on Saturday. Lapland police said the woman's boyfriend was arrested after allegedly fleeing the scene on a sledge.
ITV News understands that staff at Tata's Steelworks in Port Talbot will be told on Wednesday of a plan to keep the site open. The deal would safeguard the jobs of around 4,500 employees working at the plant in Wales.
And a 101-year-old man, thought to be the oldest defendant in British legal history, has gone on trial, accused of child sex abuse. Ralph Clark, seen wearing the cap, who's from Birmingham, denies 31 offences.
Italy's Prime Minister has tonight officially tendered his resignation after being resoundingly beaten in his country's referendum yesterday. Matteo Renzi's defeat has not only left his country in turmoil, it's dealt another big blow to the future of the EU amid fears that his departure could open the door to anti-European groups, as our Europe editor James Mates reports from Rome.
The result had barely been announced when demonstrators gathered outside the Italian Prime Minister's official residence, demanding his resignation. Ora basta, that's enough, they shouted. And if that left Matteo Renzi in any doubt, the morning papers will have dispelled that. Renzi go home, screamed one headline. The result of the referendum captured everywhere in the single word, no. This evening at the presidential palace, they got their wish. The man who's led this country for almost 3 years, handing his resignation to the president. Just the latest victim of the 2016 electoral curse.
For almost 3 years, a lifetime in Italian politics, the Prime Minister's office here has been occupied by a man who is dynamic, pro-European and determined to reform Italy. A caretaker will take over now, but the next permanent resident here is quite likely to be none of those things.
It's likely the present finance minister will take over as caretaker, maybe for a year or so before elections are called. Observers here noting he'll be the 4th PM in succession who didn't win power at the ballot box.
I would say Monti let Renzi, and now we would have a 4th one. But the fact of the matter is...
None of them directly elected.
None of them directly elected. But, you know, the parliamentary system of Italy says that the parliament decides who the prime minister is.
But every now and again it would be good to have one who won an election.
Absolutely.
The problem for Europe can be encapsulated in this scene from just a few months ago. Of the 5 leaders at this meeting in Germany, Cameron and Renzi had gone. Presidents Obama and Hollande of France are on the way out, leaving just Chancellor Merkel, the last woman standing, and now fighting fires on multiple fronts. Italy may turn out to be a big one, with its banks teetering, some of them dangerously, and its economy stagnant for almost a decade. And now it is leaderless, and growing increasingly Eurosceptic. James Mates, ITV News, Rome.
And finally tonight, it's journey's end for a woman who took an extraordinary trip to discover why some of our most endangered birds are dying out. The population of Bowick swans has almost halved in 20 years, and the numbers are now critically low.
So conservationist Sasha Dench took to the skies to follow the swans as they migrate from the Russian Arctic to the UK. Sasha arrived home today and told Richard Pallow all about her adventure.
Her only airborne company this morning was human. The Bowick swans Sasha Dench has been tracking had decided to head elsewhere. But it is their migration route that she had followed, on her own, often thousands of feet up in freezing temperatures, an aerial glimpse into a world that we still don't fully understand.
Hello! You start.
There definitely were flying conditions that no paramotor pilot in the UK would ever attempt to fly in, but it was a reality of migration, so we had to do it. And so there were definitely moments where I was so cold that I would land and then cry until I got feeling back in my fingers.
Sasha took off from the swans' breeding ground in Russia in mid-September. She tracked their progress through 11 countries, including Finland, Estonia, Poland and into Western Europe, where the birds head as temperatures drop. Their journey ends at their wintering ground in Gloucestershire, in total a 4,600-mile odyssey. Illegal hunting, the loss of wetlands and newly erected power lines have seen their numbers drop by almost half. And then there's the occasional danger of a motorised paraglider.
And at the last minute I thought, oh my God, they're going to collide, and I went to move and they just tucked in behind my wingtip as though they were forming a V with me and flew there for a few minutes. I sat going, no, this is not happening.
So like you were one of them at the time?
Yes.
Sasha will now fly to the Slimbridge Sanctuary near the River Severn. Thousands of swans are waiting for a familiar face. Richard Pallow, ITV News, Dover.
And that is all for now. Tom Bradbury's here just before 10:30.
But from all the Evening News team, have a very good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.